And welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports podcast where I, Richard Harris, talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s over the sports of today. Today's topic could get me some trouble, but I'm learning that more and more people are speaking their minds about a lot of weird topics, and so this one is not weird, but this one I must preface by saying that I'm far from a racist. I married a white woman. I have a child who's mixed race. I went to high school. I was the only black male in my grade, black student in my grade for the 9th and 10th grade, and then black male in my grade from 11th to 12th grade. Been around white people my whole life. I've heard everything. I've heard every bad joke, heard every dumb joke, and I've heard every statement said. With that being said, here we go. Bad weekend for the brothers. With the exception of, well, I said the brothers, so I should say black people, because with the exception of Coco Gauff and Alicia Parks and her partner, whose name totally just Taylor Townsend, we got our butts kicked. Sean O'Malley knocked out our champion like it was going out of style. I couldn't believe it. And then on the undercard of that fight, the MMA fight, there was two other brothers that fought, and they got beat too. And I couldn't believe it, because back in the 80s and 90s, the brothers, we never lost to white people, to white fighters. Aljamain Sterling was a bad man. They said that he is the greatest bantamweight anyone had seen. Did I think the fight got stopped too soon? Yeah. He looked like he was rolling over to sort of get back up, and the referee stopped the fight before O'Malley pounced on him. But MMA is not boxing in the respect of traditional boxing. We all know that it's mixed martial arts. But it's crazy that, like, in the last year, the white man is making a comeback in all combat sports. Tyson Fury knocked the snot out of Wilder. And some people believe he won all three fights. The only reason why they don't think he won the first fight is because Wilder dropped him twice, and thus got the 2-point round and maybe even got a 3-point round. But the bottom line is, in the 80s and 90s, that didn't happen too often. In fact, I remember way back, I want to say it was 1980, Jerry Cooney, who was supposed to be the next great white hope, and he was. He beat the hell out of Ken Norton in a fight. May he rest in peace. He beat him so badly. He beat him in 54 seconds. I believe it's the fastest knockout, or the second fastest knockout, in a heavyweight championship fight in history. And to make matters more humiliating, Saturday Night Live used it as its opening monologue after the fight. So Cooney knocks out Norton. Saturday Night Live the next week decides, we don't got a monologue this week. We just going to show you his ass whooping that Jerry Cooney put on Ken Norton. And I was a young kid at the time. I was like 12 years old, and I remember going to barbershops and listening to the older black men talk about boxing. As when you go to a barbershop, black men like to engage in discussion about the issues of the day, politics, mostly sports, mostly debates about topics. And that was a topic of discussion at the barbershop. That how the heck the white man beat the hell out of Ken Norton, who was a great fighter. And then you start thinking about the 70s. There were some good white fighters in the 70s, and they did beat some black fighters, contenders, whatever, fighting for championships. But they never beat the champions. Ali, he destroyed every one of them. Joe Frazier, everyone that got in front of him, he destroyed. But I remember a couple of white fighters in the 80s that, well, they didn't get to fight for the title, but they fought black fighters, and, you know, they had a little bit of success. But never the champs. Because I remember then, after Cooney beat Norton, he wanted the title. He wanted to fight Larry Holmes, and he was insulting Larry Holmes. He was saying all kinds of stuff about Larry Holmes. And I remember as a kid, I don't know why sports get to me so much. But I remember as a kid, I was scared. I was like, oh my God, he gonna beat Larry Holmes. He's gonna catch him with that left hook, and it's gonna be a wrap. And then the fight happened. And for a few rounds, Cooney looked good. But Larry Holmes had that look in his eye like, I ain't gonna let, you must be crazy if you think I'm gonna let this white man beat me. And he absolutely pounded him into submission, into a TKO in the 13th round. Because back in the day, they fought 15 rounds. Had it been a 12-round fight, Holmes would have won on decision, probably. But the 13th round, he made sure that he won. And I remember sitting there taking a humongous deep breath when I watched that fight. I was like, whew. Because the next time I went to the barbershop, first of all, no one liked Larry Holmes as a champion. Larry Holmes' reign of boxing is the most disrespected reign of boxing because people say the heavyweight division didn't have anybody during that time period. People say that there were some heavy-handed fighters after Ali left, but Leon Spinks wasn't really much of a champion. Michael Spinks wasn't much of a champion. Larry Holmes could fight his butt off. Larry Holmes, if he came up and boxed today, would be a problem because that left jab was devastating. Larry Holmes fought Mike Tyson. And after the fight, Mike Tyson said, he started to show me that left jab ain't no joke. And had we fought in his day, it would have been a problem. But tonight was my night. In so many words. But he's the most disrespected champion because he had no one really, quote unquote, in his class that was any good, which I think is a lie because Ernie Shavers could fight. You know, Ron Lyle could fight. But people disrespect them. But I digress. And then the 80s progressed a little longer, got into the 90s, and there was another white fighter by the name of Donnie Lalonde. And I remember Donnie Lalonde, he was Canadian, he was 155 pounds, he looked bigger than that, and he was a pretty good fighter. And he was going to fight Sugar Ray Leonard. And Sugar Ray Leonard, of course, was one of my favorite fighters as a kid. And I'm like, but Sugar Ray had the detached retina problem, couldn't really see, and had all these issues. But Sugar Ray wanted to prove that he could still fight. And so he fought Donnie Lalonde. And Donnie Lalonde was saying all the same things that Jerry Cooney was saying about Larry Holmes. Sugar Ray's old, he's not the same guy, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, got in that ring, and Ray Leonard reminded him that, yo, I won the Olympics in 1976. I can still throw hands. I may not be able to see as good out of his eye, but I'll hit the one in the middle. If I see the one in the middle in the face, I'm going to punch you in that face. And he did. And he knocked the snot out of Donnie Lalonde. Now, there were good white fighters, too, in the 80s, 90s, who never really got the shot to fight for a title. I mean, Butterbean didn't fight for the championship. Tommy Morrison, he was ESPN's doll, and they had him on TV all the time fighting. He was in a movie, he was in Rocky. In fact, that was the biggest thing that made black men at that time period angry. That Rocky beat Apollo Creed. Because Apollo Creed literally was just manhandling him in the fights. And if that was happening today, the fight would have been stopped like 65 times. But they ain't stopped fights in those days. Well, a movie, of course. And then Rocky beat Clubber Lang. And it made every Italian all around the world say, yo, we can take on you guys anytime, any place. And I remember being in the barbershop, again, as a kid, listening to the discussions in the barbershop about how they showing these movies about white people beating up black people all the time. But in real life, it wasn't happening. And then I remember Jerry Cooney fought George Foreman. Cooney was trying to make a comeback, trying to prove that, he wasn't a hype. And he ran into them thunderous hands of Foreman, and that was all she wrote. And then later on in the 90s, you had Arturo Gatti fight Floyd Mayweather. Gotti was famous for all his fights with Mickey Ward. Mickey Ward was a rough and tough white fighter. I remember seeing him fighting too many black guys, but he could fight. But Gotti got him. And then Gotti stepped up in class and fought Floyd. May Gotti rest in peace. And then Ricky Hatton had all of Ireland in Las Vegas. He wanted a piece of Floyd. And Floyd was like, Mom, come get some. And dropped him in 10 rounds. So this new phenomenon of white fighters beating black fighters is funny to me. But it's only in MMA. Well, actually, I can't say it's only in MMA. It's everywhere now. I remember Joe Calzaghe. He fought Bernard Hopkins. Knocked him out the ring. That was the first time I was like, that didn't just happen. And you know what's funny? I just thought of this. You know Mike Tyson had on that knockout streak when he was first coming up and fighting? I believe most of them were white people he was knocking out. I don't think he fought any black people until he got the championship. Could be wrong, but check that. Now I ain't got nothing to say about the Latinos. The Latinos, equal opportunity ass whoopers. They beat us, we beat them. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, I don't remember too many Latinos beating blacks either. I remember Aaron Pryor fought Alexis Arguello. And everybody in the world said Arguello was going to win because Arguello was the man. He could really throw hands. He was really special. But Aaron Pryor, he had something in him too. And Aaron Pryor showed that he could throw hands with anybody and absolutely dominated the fight. I couldn't believe what I was watching because I had seen so many Arguello fights and Pryor fights, and I'm like, Pryor's too aggressive. He's just going to go in there and, take his swings. And he took his swings, and they were good swings. And I remember watching Wilfred Benitez fight Sugar Ray Leonard. And I remember sitting there going, Benitez can fight. Sugar Ray took care of that. The most controversial fight, Meldrick Taylor was beating the hell out of Julio Cesar Chavez for 11 rounds. And then in the 12th round, Chavez finally connected on a punch and dropped Taylor and then got counted out with 2 seconds to go in the fight. And what was messed up about it was Taylor was on his feet. And the referee, Richard Steele, black referee, said, nah, it's over. Which sent everybody crazy. How in the world? I mean, Taylor absolutely dominated him the whole fight. And Oscar De La Hoya came along. He started whipping everybody. And then Oscar De La Hoya started fighting really, really, really good fighters. And then he got in the ring with Floyd, and that was all she wrote for him. He beat Pernell Whitaker. It was a good fight. Whitaker fought a weird style. But Oscar was Oscar. I'm not saying things to try to be racist or start a race war. All I'm saying is, I guess there's a new sheriff in town. And his name is not Reggie Hammonds. The white man's coming back.